have an active shooter. We have an active shooter.
Let's go ahead and declare this a mass casualty.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot. 16910 means we got shots fired at 4:15 at Route 291. Sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter
of mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the Active Shooter podcast. Thank you for listening to part 1 of our coverage of the Las Vegas Route 91 Harvest Festival shooting. We will continue our coverage with part 2, which will focus on the shooting victims and the shooter's background. According to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's Criminal Investigative Report, there were 58 people killed in the attack. There were about 413 people injured by gunfire or shrapnel, but the overall number was closer to 867, when considering the various ways some were harmed trying to flee the shooting. The following were the victims of the shooting. Jack Reginald Beaton, 54 years old. He was from Bakersfield, California, and was married with 2 children. Christopher Lewis Roybal, 28 years old, a veteran who served in Afghanistan. Lisa Marie Patterson, 46 years old, a mother to 3, and who was very involved with the local girls' softball league. Adrian Allen Murfitt, 35 years old. Adrian was a commercial fisherman from Anchorage, Alaska, who was always described as being happy. Hannah Lisette Allers, 34 years old. Hannah was a mother of 3 from Murrieta, California. Austin William Davis, 29 years old. Austin was part of a very close family, and he was an only child. Stephen Richard Berger, 44 years old. Stephen was a father of 3 from Minnesota and was described as a humble guy and a great father. Stacy Ann Etchber, 50 years old. Stacy was a mother to a 10-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl. At the concert, she was there with her husband. Christiana Duarte, 22 years old. Christiana graduated from the University of Arizona and worked as a fan services associate for the Los Angeles Kings. Lisa Ramirez Munez, 48 years old. Lisa was a discipline secretary at Mayamura High School in Gallup, New Mexico. Heather Lorraine Alvarado, 35 years old. Mother to 3 children, ages 4, 7, and 14. Heather was the happiest when she was spending time with her family. Denise Cohen, 58 years old. Denise was the mother of 2 sons and absolutely loved country music and traveling. Kurt Allen Vontillo, 55 years old. Kurt was from Northern California and was a husband, father, and grandfather. Brennan Lee Stewart, 30 years old. Brennan died shielding his girlfriend, and it makes sense because he always put others before himself. Derek Bo Dean Taylor, 56 years old. Derek, or Bo, was 29-year veteran of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and he was at the concert with his girlfriend, who also died. Kelsey Brianne Meadows, 28 years old. Kelsey was a substitute teacher in Taft, California. Jennifer Topaz Irvine, 42 years old, a lawyer in San Diego. William W. Wolf Jr., 42 years old. William was from Pennsylvania and coached for Shippensburg Little League and Shippensburg Greyhound Wrestling. Carly Ann Krybaum, 33 years old. Carly was from Sutherland, Iowa, and a mother of two. Laura Ann Shipp, 50 years old. Laura was originally from Thousand Oaks, California, and moved to Vegas about 5 years earlier. Laura had attended multiple days of the Route 91 festival. Carrie Ray Barnett, 34 years old, and a member of the culinary team for Disney California Adventure for 10 years. Jordan Nicole Rivera, 21 years old. Jordan was a fourth-year student at Cal State San Bernardino's healthcare management program. Victor Lloyd Link, 55 years old, had an adult son and was a proud father, brother, son, uncle, and friend. Candace Ryan Bowers, 40 years old, a mother of three who loved dancing to country music with her loved ones. Jordan Allen Mickeldoon, 23 years old, from Maple Ridge, British Columbia. Carrie Lynn Galvin, 31 years old, a mother of three who had worked for Maestro's Steakhouse for almost a decade. Doreen Anderson, 49 years old. Visiting Vegas with her husband and two daughters, she was described as very friendly and genuine, with a kind heart. Nasa C. Tonks, 46 years old. Nasa lived in Vegas and left behind three sons. Melissa V. Ramirez, 26 years old. Graduated from Cal State Bakersfield in 2014 and was a massive Eagles fan. Brian Scott Fraser, 39 years old, lived in La Palma, California, and was described as having an infectious energy. Tara Ann Rowe, 34 years old. Tara was from Canada and worked as an educational assistant for a school district. Bailey Schweitzer, 20 years old. Bailey was from Bakersfield, California, and worked for Infinity Communications and Consulting. She's described as a ray of sunshine. Patricia Mestas, 67 years old, a native of Menifee Lakes, California. She was attending the concert with her friend and son. Jennifer Parks, 35 years old, a kindergarten teacher at Ana Verde Hills in Palmdale, California. Jennifer was described as enthusiastic, energetic, and dedicated. Angela Gomez, 20 years old, graduated from Riverside Polytechnic High School in California in 2015. Denise Berditis, 50 years old, from West Virginia. Denise died in her husband's arms. She was the mother of two and soon to be a grandmother. Cameron Robinson, 28 years old, worked as a management analyst for the city of Las Vegas and attended the concert with his boyfriend and died in his boyfriend's arms. James Melton, 29 years old, a nurse from Tennessee. James died shielding his wife, who survived. Quentin Robbins, 20 years old, from Henderson, Nevada, died a few hours after the shooting. Charleston Hartfield, 34 years old. Charleston was a Nevada Army National Guard Sergeant First Class and was also a Las Vegas police officer. Eric Silva, 21 years old, lived in Las Vegas and worked for the Contemporary Services Corporation. Teresa Nicole Kimura, 38 years old, from Southern California, was with a group of 7 at the concert and was considered a loving and considerate friend. Susan Smith, 53 years old, worked at the Vista Elementary School in Simi Valley, California. Dana Leanne Gardner, 52 years old, was a mother of 3 and was with one of her daughters at the concert. Luckily, her daughter was not injured. Thomas Tom Day Jr., 54 years old. Tom was a father of 4 children, and all were at the concert with him. John Joseph Phippen, 56 years old, was a father of 6 and was from Santa Clarita, California. Rachel Kathleen Parker, 33 years old, from California's Manhattan Beach Police Department, worked as a records technician. Sandra Casey, 35 years old, a special education teacher in Manhattan Beach, California. Jessica Klimchuk, 35 years old, educational assistant, librarian, and bus driver at St. Stephen's Catholic School in Alberta, Canada. Andrea Lee Anna Castilla, 28 years old. Andrea was at the concert with her family and has been described as having a beautiful soul. Carolyn Lee Parsons, 31 years old, was from Seattle and was recently engaged during a trip to Hawaii. Michelle Vo, 32 years old, worked for the New York Life in Greater Pasadena. Michelle Vo, 32 years old, worked for New York Life in Greater Pasadena. Rocio Gillen, 40 years old, was a mother of 4, including a 1-month-old baby boy, described as being a supermom. Christopher Hazencombe, 44 years old, was from California and saved his friend from getting hit so she would be able to raise her 2 boys. Brett Schwanbeck, 61 years old, was a father and grandfather. Brett was a great man who was funny, generous, kind, loving, and full of joy. Rhonda M. LaRoque, 42 years old, leaves behind a 6-year-old daughter. Rhonda loved to cook, bake, and travel. Austin Cooper Meyer, 24 years old, attending the concert with his fiancée, celebrating his birthday, which was 2 weeks prior. Austin had recently moved to Reno, Nevada. Calla Marie Medigue, 28 years old, from California. Calla Marie will be missed by her family and coworkers from Moxie's restaurant. She was described as being the rock of the restaurant. Eric, the eldest of 4 boys, was born on April 9, 1953 in Clinton, Iowa. Not long after he was born, Eric's family moved to Tucson, Arizona. In 1960, when he was 7, Eric's dad was arrested and convicted for robbing a bank. He escaped from prison in 1968 and even landed on the FBI's most wanted list. He was eventually caught after 10 years on the run. His return to prison was short-lived, however, because he was paroled about a year after he was captured. He obviously wasn't around much, and Eric's mother was essentially the sole caregiver for her kids. In fact, she even went so far as to tell her kids that their father passed away in a car accident when he was sent to prison. She never wanted her boys to know the terrible things their father did. She packed the kids up and moved to the Sun Valley neighborhood of Los Angeles. Eric's childhood was mostly raised in low-income housing, and his mother did the best she could, working as a secretary to make ends meet. Because he grew up with very little, watching a mother struggle to raise 4 kids on little income, Eric learned to become self-sufficient and, relying only on himself, he never really learned how to develop trusting relationships. One of Eric's brothers suggested that while all of the brothers battled with anger issues, it was Eric who seemed to struggle the least. The same brother even described Eric as, quote, the most boring one in the family, and was certainly the least violent. Indeed, Eric's was a slow, simmering rage that developed over time, a rage that became uncontrollable. Classmates of Eric's describe him as both quiet and withdrawn, but also as a, quote, math genius. He attended Richard E. Byrd Middle School before Sun Valley High School. Eric transferred to John H. Francis Polytechnic High School, which is where he graduated in 1971. He would eventually enroll at California State University, Northridge, and graduate with a business management degree. During the years between 1975 and 78, Eric worked as a postal worker for the United States Post Office. After that job, Eric was hired by the IRS, or Internal Revenue Service, where he worked until 1984. In 1985, he was hired by the Defense Contract Audit Agency as an auditor, which he appeared to do for several years before working as an internal auditor for a company that was later bought out by Lockheed Martin. Eric lived in Los Angeles from the 1970s to the early 2000s. He owned property in Cerritos, North Hollywood, and Panorama City, as well as 2 apartment complexes in Hawthorne, California, and another in Mesquite, Texas, which he sold in 2012. Some relatives believe that Eric was worth about $2 million after he sold a lucrative real estate business. In fact, one of his most successful investments was in an apartment complex that he bought in 2004. By 2011, that complex was earning him over $500,000 of steady income. When he eventually sold the building in 2015, he netted a profit somewhere between $5 and $6 million. According to friends and family, Eric was known to gamble quite a bit, and though it's unclear whether he ever won a substantial amount of money, he was often captured on CCTV in high-limit rooms, usually playing video poker, which was his favorite game, for over 25 years. It proved to be a logical choice of entertainment since Eric didn't like the sun at all. He preferred to be out at night. Eric was married twice and divorced twice with no children. His first marriage was from 1977 to 1979, and the second lasted a bit longer from 1985 to 1990. Both of the short-lived unions were in Los Angeles, and by all accounts, Eric was on decent terms with both women. His second marriage lasted approximately 6 years. After the couple divorced, they continued to invest in real estate in Los Angeles together. The ex-wife stated that Eric handled details of the sale and purchase of properties, while she assisted in financial support. She claimed that Eric never wanted to draw attention to himself, so he wore plain clothing and drove nondescript vehicles. He eventually moved to Melbourne, Florida, where he lived in a retirement community in 2015, before moving to Mesquite, Nevada, where he purchased a new house. He met his current girlfriend, Ellen, several years before the shooting, when she was employed as a high-limit casino host in Reno, Nevada. The couple moved in together in Mesquite, though neighbors also report that they appeared to share a residence in Reno as well. Some Mesquite neighbors only recalled seeing Eric out and about. They never saw him with Ellen. Eric and Ellen's relationship developed into a romantic one over the course of several years, where they were really only professional acquaintances. He began visiting the casino Ellen worked at in Reno so frequently that he decided to quit staying in hotels and bought a condo. In 2013, Ellen moved into the condo, while Eric continued to travel back and forth between Mesquite and Reno. In 2014, Eric purchased a single-family home in Reno and sold the condo. Eric and Ellen moved in together into the home, and this became both of their primary residences. Eric bought another single-family home in January of 2015 in Mesquite this time. Ellen traveled back and forth between the two cities with Eric, and the couple seemed happy and in love for a long time. Eric was known to keep quiet and to himself most of the time, and most neighbors and others can rarely remember Eric even speaking. Despite his apparent low profile, Eric told someone he knew that he often made money from applying algorithms to the machines he was gambling on. He earned a pilot's license in 2004 and had since purchased 2 small planes. He seemed like a hard-working, well-rounded man, with many interests and passions, just a little quiet. He had little to no interaction with law enforcement, having only received a minor traffic ticket before the shooting. Eric sued the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas in September 2012, claiming that he fell over an obstruction on the floor and was injured. The lawsuit ended up being dismissed without merit. In 2010, Eric started traveling around the world and jetted off on at least 20 cruise ship voyages, stopping in ports such as the United Arab Emirates, Italy, Greece, and Jordan. In 2013 and 2014, Eric and Ellen visited the Philippines, Ellen's home country. Ellen described Eric as extremely thoughtful and romantic in the beginning, but in time she noticed a major decline in Eric's attention and affection towards her. Despite her reservations, he convinced Ellen to quit her job in 2015, saying he wanted them to travel more. So she agreed, and he gave her a monthly stipend. When she later questioned Eric about the lack of affection in their relationship, Eric claimed it was because of his health, which she initially believed. But when nothing changed, she asked again, and he just told her he couldn't commit to more affection. He didn't want to break up, but he wasn't capable of giving more. Eric was even-tempered, according to Ellen, and she hadn't ever heard him yell or become violent, so she stayed with him. Ellen's main issue with Eric, however, seemed to be his health. Eric often complained of feeling sick, bemoaning about doctors just couldn't fix what ailed him. Eric told Ellen he had a chemical imbalance that caused terrible headaches whenever he was exposed to chemical smells. He frequently requested to be moved from one hotel room to another for this reason. Early into their relationship, Eric requested that Ellen not wear perfume because he was allergic. He almost always wore cotton gloves when working or using his hands, and rarely shook hands with others. The couple never discussed politics or seemingly any really in-depth topics. Eric's autopsy showed that he was not under the influence at the time of the shooting. His tox screen also didn't show Valium, which is something Eric was prescribed about 4 months prior to the shooting. Reports after the shooting indicate that Eric was losing a significant amount of money leading up to the shooting, likely due to his substantial gambling debts. The money troubles led to depressive episodes, which led to more gambling, and thus the cycle continued. Between 1982 and September of 2016, he purchased about 29 weapons, including handguns and shotguns. Between October of 2016 and September 28th of 2017, Eric purchased over 55 firearms, most of which were rifles. He also bought an overabundance of firearm accessories, including bullets and shells. Ellen noticed the frequency in which Eric was buying firearms, but she just attributed it to being a hobby. About 2 weeks before the shooting, Eric surprised Ellen with a surprise plane ticket to the Philippines. Her plane ticket was for September 15th through October 4th. Eric wire transferred Ellen 3 separate transactions, totaling $150,000. She was told that the money was to purchase a new home there. Police dug in and opened a large-scale investigation. They spoke with Eric's mother, who told them that she was previously business partners with Eric, and that the last time they spoke was over the phone a few weeks before the shooting, when Eric called to check in on her after Hurricane Irma. She couldn't think of any religious or political groups he would be involved with. Eric was a math whiz, intelligent, and hard-working, but importantly, she said her son was not violent. She believed that Eric suffered from a brain injury, which she thinks may have even led to the eventual shooting. The FBI also interviewed Eric's youngest brother, who said that Eric had mental issues and one of their other brothers was a sociopath. The brother said he last spoke with Eric by text a few weeks before the shooting. He indicated that it wasn't unusual for the men to go long stretches without speaking, and Eric typically called when he needed something. The brother went on, saying that he and Eric didn't talk about politics. He wasn't liberal or conservative, and he didn't even think Eric voted. He did say that Eric previously worked for the IRS, which is how and where he learned how to hide income. Eric and his mother owned several properties together, including the apartment complexes in California and Texas. Eric's brother claimed that after the sale of business properties Eric owned with their mother, Eric moved to Nevada, and his life slowly began to revolve around gambling. He said that he believes Eric committed this attack because 1, he was bored, and 2, he's already done or accomplished everything he set out to do. What else was there? He also believed that Eric would have thoroughly enjoyed the infamy of being known as the worst mass shooter in U.S. history, or at least, he would have appreciated having, quote, the largest casualty count. The brother further said that Eric was basically a narcissist, only caring about others if they were of some use or benefit to him. Eric needed others to consider him, but couldn't be bothered to think of others. He didn't think Eric had anger issues per se, but rather believed his brother was extremely passive-aggressive. The same brother told police that Eric always did the taxes for most of the family, and he had the nerve to cheat them. One of Eric's other brothers talked with police and simply said they hadn't had contact in years, nor had they seen Eric in recent years. In fact, the two brothers hadn't spoken for over 10 years and hadn't seen each other since the 1990s. This brother also believed that Eric was probably suffering mental illness, paranoia, and delusions. The third and last brother was interviewed by police and said he'd not had contact with Eric at all. In fact, he elaborated, he had no interest in seeing or speaking to any members of his family. Police were also able to interview Eric's nephew, which also wasn't especially productive. He said he'd not spoken to his uncle since June of 2017, when the two met for dinner in Reno, when the nephew was there for a convention. He claimed his uncle seemed fine and didn't exhibit any odd or strange behavior, but rather his uncle was always, quote, aloof. He kept to himself but enjoyed luxury things in life. Finally, police interviewed Eric's family doctor, who indicated that Eric was acting a little odd at their last encounter. He believed that Eric suffered from bipolar disorder, but Eric refused to discuss the topic. He also refused to take antidepressants, but would eventually accept an anxiety medication. The doctor indicated that Eric appeared fearful of medications, often refusing to take them at all. As discussed in part 1 of this case, the motive for this shooting is simple. Fame, infamy. He felt the surest way to accomplish such a disgusting feat was to murder so many people that he would be known as the deadliest mass shooter in U.S. history. He accomplished a part of that goal. The shooter wanted his name known. He wanted people to say his name. And that is why we do not name them here on Active Shooter. We all have the unique ability to help prevent such a catastrophic event from happening. If we keep our eyes and ears open and never hesitate to report when something or someone just doesn't seem right. With the delicate balance of mental health reform, education, and active shooter training, we may one day realize the dream that there will be no more active shootings. We pray that love will prevail over hate.
Too many have died. We should say to ourselves, not one more.
In the meantime, we urge our listeners to stay aware of your surroundings and keep in touch with your loved ones. If you see something, say something. You never know how many lives you'll be saving. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Active Shooter, the podcast. Remember, if you see something, say something. There's no telling how many lives you may be saving. A big thank you to Darren Curtis, who composed some of the songs on our show. You can find him online at www.darrencurtismusic.com. Make sure to check us out on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Active Shooter, the podcast, and on Twitter at Podcast Active. Thank you, and be safe.